with where we're at. I mean, and again, this isn't Stockholm Syndrome talking. I want to be very clear. It's not my Stockholm Syndrome talking. I'm straight up impressed they got this coaching staff. So without further ado, I want to just go ahead and dive straight into it. So we're going to just go through the first big hire, honestly, in order of operations was Matt Eberflus coming back as the defensive coordinator. It was like literally immediately after Brian Schottenheimer got the job, we found out that Matt Eberflus was coming back. And a lot of people thought this was terrible. Like a lot of fans that don't understand who not Brian Schottenheimer, Matt Eberflus is and what he's done defensively don't realize how decent of a pickup this is. Looking at what he did in Indianapolis and also with his time in Chicago, he had top 10 scoring defenses, teams that were able to, get pressure and also more importantly, have good passing defenses, And also, this is the key thing. He was able to stop the run. And I think a lot of people forget this. Just looking at his stats from Indianapolis with his rush defense, top 10 metrics, really the only time he didn't have a top 10 metric was in 2022 with Chicago and then this year when he got fired. Otherwise, we're in a situation where you're getting a guy that is not as philosophically similar as Mike Zimmer. Like, he's not going to blitz a whole lot. But the one thing I will give him credit for is he does know how to stop the run, which is something that I've been big on. How do you feel about this hire, man?
No, it's an awesome hire. It's a really good hire here by the Jones family. I think that, there is differences between Eberflus and Mike Zimmer and Dan Quinn. But one thing that I would say is all those guys are quality defensive coordinators. Now, here's the thing when it comes to Matt Eberflus. They're going to have to get guys to play his defense, like straight up. Mike Zimmer, I don't feel like we got the most out of Mike Zimmer, not because of Mike Zimmer. It's because of the fact that we didn't do enough to get his guys on this football team. We need to get guys that fit the Matt Eberflus scheme, which is they play that attacking 4-3 front. They want to be really good at 3 technique. The linebackers are going to play very well. They're a vision defense. So that's where I like this hire. They're not going to give up a lot of big plays. I know he's synonymous for literally a big play. That's going to be the thing that's like attached to his coaching career when it came to that Washington-Chicago game. But that's not who he is. He's not a guy that's going to give up. His defenses aren't going to give up a ton of big plays. So, yeah, I think it's a very good hire here. And one thing that I like is that they're philosophically aligned when it comes to this defensive coaching staff, which is something that we didn't see in the McCarthy era due to the fact that Mike McCarthy hired bad coaches. I mean, let's just call it what it is. Hired bad coaches. And I don't think the Cowboys are doing that this time around. I think they're hiring really good coaches. And especially, you have a guy from New York. What does New York play? They play a vision defense, attacking 4-3 front. So you're seeing guys that have continuity with Matt Eberflus, that have an understanding of the scheme he wants to run. And I think that this is ultimately going to be a very good hire here for Dallas.
I completely agree. I think that when you look at all of the coaches, position coaches more specifically, that they've added on, the key point, you're aligning the coaching staff with the vision you're trying to build defensively and even offensively. And I think that while there's still some position groups on the offensive side of the ball they still have to fill, what they're doing is something that I've been wanting them to do even when Mike McCarthy came here, even when Jason Garrett was here, and even when Wade Phillips was here, is that there was an understanding that Matt Eberflus was going to come back either way. But one of the big things is that it's not a guy that sucks at his job. Right. We're talking about, like, for example, like, to me, this feels like the Dan Quinn hire. Like, people were bitching and complaining about Dan Quinn because, oh, look what he did in Atlanta. And by the way, we kind of knew that Dan Quinn, the DC, is fantastic to a point. And then on top of that, you saw how dramatically the defense played better under him as opposed to what you had with Mike Nolan, who was trying to do a 3-4, but clearly you didn't have the personnel to do that.
Stinks.
It was terrible. But that's a great point. Look, Mike McCarthy, I'll give him this. He didn't have a chance to pick his OC, which, to be honest with you, if he did, I would say that he probably wanted to go with Brian Schottenheimer, but he was still under contract with Seattle, so I don't know if he would have come over here. But now with Brian Schottenheimer being the head coach, the DC hire is great, but the next thing that really blew my mind, Chris, and I'll have you take it away from here, the OC hire, Clayton Adams, who we were both clamoring for all throughout the hiring process as an OC candidate. This guy became the OC. Like, we were shocked. We thought they were going to go in a completely different direction, but they went out and got a guy which, to your point, philosophically aligns with what Brian Schottenheimer wants to do. So tell me about what makes Clayton Adams so great. Why is he a great hire?
Well, so one of my friends, he covers the Arizona Cardinals, gave me a quote. He's elite, and the offensive line before he got there was never good, and he made them a very solid unit with not great players over the course of the past 2 seasons. So, Adams is a guy who you're going to get creativity in the run game, which is something that we have not seen. I can't tell you the last time we saw that. So that's big because when you look at the league now, you have these teams like Miami who have a creative run scheme, San Francisco, you can go down the line. Detroit with Ben Johnson had a really creative run scheme. We'll see what they do there now with their new offensive coordinator. But that's where the league is going. And, when we talk about this offensive line, this is a unit that you have to invest in, not just because it's the offensive line, but because you made investments at that position. You spent 2 first-round picks on Tyler Smith and Tyler Guyton. You spent a 3rd-round pick on Cooper Beebe. By the way, you're probably going to pay Tyler Smith either this offseason or next offseason. You gave a big contract to Terrence Steele, right? So there are a lot of pieces on this offensive line that you have invested in. So the Cowboys needed to get a guy in here that's going to help out this offensive line, move on from Mike Solari, which I cannot see any world in which Mike Solari returns. I know people are like worried about that. I don't think you should be worried about that. But, when we talk about philosophically being aligned, this team's going to want to run the football, which, by the way, if you have a creative run scheme and you have the running backs to do it, you can have a very good offense running the football, right? I think that the Cowboys are going to go out there and draft a running back this year. If Gentry's there at 12, I believe it's probably going to be Gentry. I think they're going to either that or they're going to draft a running back in the 2nd round. And the reason why I say that is because they're bringing in high-profile running back coach candidates. So I think it's because they're going to place such an emphasis on the run game and building play action off of it.
For sure. And I just want to let the people know what Clayton Adams did this year, which was absolutely fantastic. Okay. Now, I want to be very clear. There are no notable names on the Cardinals offensive line. No offense to the guys on that line, meaning like
Outside of
they're
Paris Johnson.
outside of Paris Johnson for sure. But like when I say that, I'm not saying like they're like all pro, like all that other stuff. And I think with what Clayton Adams did here, right, we're talking about 7th in the NFL in rushing yards, which also only trail, I believe, let me see here, in total rushing yards, excuse me, also had the 2nd best league rushing yards per average carry, 5.3 yards per carry. That is amazing considering how often they ran the ball. And you look at rushing touchdowns, top 10, 5th most in carries of 20 yards or more, tied for the first in the NFL in carries of 40 yards or more, right? And then you look at the group that he's joining, and he's going to have a lot more talent to work with, especially on the offensive line. And so for me, looking at what he was able to do with Arizona, also this guy is on the younger side of things, and I'm going to get into the age bracket for all of these guys, these coordinators, and even your head coach in just a moment. But for Clayton Adams, he's a guy that also has ties to Boise State, so I wouldn't be shocked if they went with Genty now. It just seems like it's a foregone conclusion as of this point in time. But I really was big on this. And I said it in the last episode when they hired Brian Schottenheimer. You need to let this dude get his guys. You need to get coordinators that will match what you want to do. Even if you guys don't like what it is, like if you're like, I'm not a big fan of running the ball because, it's a passing offense. I mean, sure, that's fine. But if you do not have a philosophy or an identity of what you're going to do, your team is screwed because it affects how you draft. It affects how you go after free agents, even though they don't really go after free agents. But
You're gonna have
that's
to
what,
this year.
but you're going to have to for sure. And we'll talk about that. But no, man, I really think that this was a great hire. This is the first time he's been an offensive coordinator in his entire coaching career. So congrats to him. And he's going to be doing it with a guy that wants to do what he wants to do. And for those that are worried that, like to your point, if Mike Solari, is Mike Solari going to come back? No, I don't think he is. He's on the older side. And we've kind of gotten an indication that they're not going to bring him back, especially with Lunda Wells returning as the tight ends coach, which is great. I think they're going to go look at some other options. But again, as they continue to add on the position coaches, it just gets better and better and better. But again, you can have the best coaching staff ever. You got to go get the ingredients for those guys. Now,
And
go
one
ahead.
thing I do want to say about this is it seems like they're getting younger guys that just like really connect well with players, which is
Mm-hmm.
like, here's the thing. Everybody thinks you need to have John Gruden in there, type of coach like that, where he's just screaming at the players the entire time. It does not necessarily always translate. So that's one thing to take into consideration. It seems like they're building a coaching staff of guys who are actually serious, very good at their job, and they're very good at their jobs, and they don't have to scream at people to get their message across. So, there's going to be accountability with this coaching staff because good coaches hold people accountable. And by all accounts, these coaches are very good at their jobs. So there's going to be accountability. It's not going to be screaming at people on the sidelines because just because you scream doesn't mean that you're a good coach. And that's what I would say about that. It seems like they're building a younger coaching staff, and maybe there's some guys that maybe they start to build some trees here of coaching staff, from their coaching staff, which would be fantastic. Like that is a good thing. If you're able to efficiently target coaches, promote them, and consistently do that, and teams want to poach those coaches from you, that's a good thing. Like that means that you have good decision makers with your coaching staff that is able to consistently hire really good coaches. And one more thing I'll add to this, for the amount of shit that we give the front office, and rightfully so, not defending anything that they do, the last two coordinators, defensive coordinators they hired, good hires. So that's what I'll say about that.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I think that that's really where it's at, is you look at what they've done and you have to applaud it, whether we want to continue, look, I'm not giving the front office
Got to
full
be
on
fair.
credit. Yeah, but you got to be fair, right? And the whole idea of having a coaching tree stem from your head coach is big in my opinion as well. Because to your point, it shows you how good of a decision maker you have as a head coach and leader, and also how they're aligned with your front office. But also it shows that you have a well-run football program where you have guys that can come in here, do a great job, continue to push your program in the right direction, and they can leave and they can continue to keep succeeding elsewhere. Now, I did want to just double check the ages. There is one more guy, Nick Sorensen, and I'm just double checking. So he is your special teams coordinator. He had been with Brian Schottenheimer in Seattle, as well as he was just recently the defensive coordinator of the 49ers. And he was the most recent special teams coordinator gig he had was with the Jags in 2021, and they weren't a good unit. And people were trying to translate the idea that because he wasn't a good defensive coordinator guy means he's not going to be a good special teams guy. I mean, I don't know. I will say I did look into that unit that the Jags had. They did not have great statistics when you look. So I do have to caution that. But again, I think for me at least, the one thing we're not going to have is the tomfoolery that John Fossil had done. And I think that that's all we care about at this point. So, nah, man, I just think at the end of the day, we have to be in a situation where, I mean, for special teams, they matter. But to me, you need the personnel more than you need a coach. I know that sounds like a cop-out answer, but it is what it is. Now, age-wise, Chris, this really shocked me, right? When I saw the ages of all of the coordinators, your main coordinators and your head coach, Brian Schottenheimer, he's 51, will be 52 this year. Clayton Adams, he's going to turn 42 on the 13th of February. Matt Eberflus, who's the oldest guy of the bunch, 54 to be 55 this year. Nick Sorensen will be 47 this year. He's currently 46. What is crazy to me is that these guys, this is probably the youngest coach, which I'm not saying much because these guys are in their 40s and 50s.
I think it's just like anything, Space. I think it's just like anything. We got to get young coaches in here, and they got to do the job, and it's just like anything. Yeah, I am not going to miss having a bunch of fossils, pun intended, on our coaching staff, especially Mike McCarthy. So, yeah, no, I like that. Like, the league is going younger. This is for the most part, this is a young man's game. Now, granted, there are coaches that are able to transcend that, right? Sean Payton, excellent job. John Harbaugh, excellent job. But there's a lot of coaches out there that, you bring them in like a Mike McCarthy type, and they can't catch up with the league. So